Jonathan Davis. I work in the middle school. This is my 13th school year at Shorecrest, all in the middle school. Some people think I'm a glutton for punishment. It's actually my 21st year working in schools. And before that, starting when I was 17, I've worked at summer camps, sleepaway summer camps. And so I looked at more than half my life I've been working with adolescents. And having said that, I am not an expert. And I learn something new about every 37 minutes with our kids. I can, however, talk a little bit more objectively about your kids because they're not my kids. So yesterday, I didn't take a picture of it yesterday. I should have put it on my first slide. I was driving out and I saw the sign because I'm discussing adolescent issues. I thought that was a little negative. Because we all have issues. But I mean, come on, they're kids. So I wish it had said Adolescent Brains. That's what I'm going to focus on. You can insert your own joke about adolescents and their brains at any time. But I would like, while we'll be talking about some serious things and some challenges, those of us who work with adolescents, and it's actually a much longer time frame than we'd like to believe, so middle school, high school teachers, 4th grade teachers, understand that there's a lot of benefit to working with kids this age, and I'll talk about that. There's also some unique things that, like, the 2nd grade teachers don't have to worry about, or people who supervise 30-year-olds don't have to worry about, but Tom and I probably lose a lot of sleep worrying about. I used to think, like many other problems, adolescence was a Western problem, an American problem, a social construct. I used to think, man, we've just given kids, you're a teenager, and then they just run with it and say, hey, I'm a teenager. And I used to really wonder, like, what is adolescence? Is it even a real thing? Is it something that we've made up? Is it something that is a little bit of time and we just exploded it into everything else? Is it me just getting fed up with my kid and I like him better when they go to college because I don't see him every morning? That might be part of it. But the research has been pretty clear. It is a real thing. And in the past, different cultures have dealt with it different ways. So for example, lots of places, especially in the Middle Ages, your kid becomes an adolescent, you ship them off to somebody else. And then you're an apprentice. Go work for someone else, learn a trade, I'm not dealing with you. A lot of cultures also created huge rites of passage. That's where we, universally, around the world, somewhere between 12 and 14 or 15, there's these big rites of passages that require a lot of intensive research and work and effort, and then you've done it, you've made it. And both of these actually have been shown to end adolescence a little bit earlier and change how the brain works. And of course, nowadays, lifespans are a lot longer, and so becoming a man or woman at 13 seems a little ridiculous. But those rites of passages serve a purpose. And so we'll even talk about how we can create our own kind of milestones that your kids feel like they're making progress and achievement. That actually helps them. The functional MRI is an incredible thing. I had lots of conversations with Jane in the past, our former middle school head, and we were talking about what was going on in the 80s and 90s in education. And at one point, for example, they were debating if dyslexia was real or not. Come on, this isn't real. And then all of a sudden, they got the ability to scan brains in action, and they found that lots of things really are real. And they now have scientific evidence to back it up. And there's 5,000 books all about the brain and its development. And so adolescence is real at a cognitive brain level. That's important to think about. It is not just a Western thing, an American thing. It happens everywhere around the world. So if you're in Tibet and you meet a 14-year-old boy, same rules apply. Watch out. And it all comes back to how they can measure brain activity and how we now realize that there's some really good benefits to the brain in adolescence, and it serves a real purpose. This is interesting. I put Will Ferrell up there because he's older than me. I don't think he's done with adolescence yet. But he's making a really damn good career out of adolescence. So congratulations to him. He's tapped into a market. And he has more aficionados every year. As we age out, I'm like, I don't find his movies that funny anymore. There's someone else who's like, this guy's hilarious. It is fascinating that adolescence has been actually starting earlier and earlier over the last several centuries. It hasn't sped up necessarily in the last 15 years, although it feels like it to us, but it's been starting earlier. The number one reason why is an improvement in health and physical well-being. And if you think about the biological reasons to start or not start adolescence, if times are tough, clearly that pushes adolescence back. For us, we're healthy, we're well-fed, we go see the doctor all the time, we pop multivitamins. That's had a huge impact on the earlier onset of adolescence. There are other things that unfortunately we cannot control, such as chemicals and plastics that are just around us. And they've proven that that's speeding it up a little bit too, which is a little interesting, slightly scary. But what I've read is even if you're militant about organic this and organic that, there's some, I guess, things that you take into your body that you really can't control. I don't know if these chairs are doing it or not, but it's out there. Especially water bottles that have been out in the sun for way too long and stuff like that. You don't want to be drinking too much. That's my that's my rant on another day. But it's not uncommon for girls to start adolescence by 10. It's something that pediatricians have actually recalibrated what's normal to accommodate these changes over the last 40 years. It extends a lot longer than people realize. So for a kid today, adolescence could extend until their early 20s based on their experiences. And while that sounds scary, it's actually great for learning. So what is it? The adolescent brain has lots of unique properties. You may know already that there's 2 times in our lives where our brains have a lot of extreme adaptability. That's when we're newborn, and that's when we're in early to mid-adolescence. And both those times are times where you can learn new things rapidly. And so if you think about a 1-year-old, they're learning to walk, talk, grab everything, understand who everyone is, all at one time. And for us as adults, that would be impossible or crippling. You're dropped off in Sri Lanka. No one speaks English. You don't recognize anything. Go. That would be very paralyzing for us. For a newborn, that's their life. And they're like, yay! This also extends for adolescents. If your kid says, I want to learn to play a musical instrument, and they've never played one before and they're 12, go for it. Because I can tell you, I got my first guitar at 32. I still know 7 songs, and that's it. You give a 12-year-old a musical instrument and a songbook and some lessons, and if they love it, in 6 months, they're competing for first chair in Pinellas County Orchestra, and you're like, how did that happen? It's also a time where, in terms of neural architecture, you can create whole new pathways, and you can solidify ones that you have in a way that we cannot. We don't have the plasticity, we don't have the right sheathing. I don't know all the specifics, but every single author says this is the time. So if your kid, and this is why some of our teachers like teaching adolescents, a kid walks in and says, I hate math. In 3 weeks, they can love math. And in 6 months, they can be the best math student. We don't have that ability. It's harder for us to make new friends, change our opinions, break out of those patterns. I had a friend in college who wanted to get his PhD in math. And if you don't go and get your PhD in math right after undergraduate, you can't go back when you're 35 and get a PhD in math. Because your brain is actually literally too fixed to come up with new mathematical concepts. I thought that was crazy.
It's crazy.
Because I'm a history English guy, like how many people didn't write their first book until they're 50, and because that part of the brain that you need to be in history or English continues to develop. But other parts of the brain, you're locked in. So
That's a terrible choice.
latte. So there's limits. There's limits. You can change, but it is a much more arduous process later on. So I'd like you to think for a moment. Think back to some time in your teenage years. And so this is between 10 and 18, let's say. And think of your favorite song. It should be something that you automatically know like all the words to. If I said karaoke, let's do it now, you can do it right now. I want you to think about your favorite song, how well you remember it. Who's got a song?
Yeah.
I want you to turn and talk to the people in your row and share what song it was and what do you remember about it and when, how old were you? When you were thinking that song. Think about that song. When I think of my favorite song, I don't even know why this pops in my head immediately. Guns N' Roses' Patience. Came out spring break senior year, and we were in a condo in Daytona Beach, and we couldn't go out to the beach until MTV played Patience. I don't like Guns N' Roses really, but there was something about that song. There were 6 boys in a condo. We're like, no, Patience is not next. We must have listened to that song 50 times in 1 week. We all have memories like that, favorite songs. You know, I like listening to music. It's on the radio. Listening to my kids listen to the music is much different. Because adolescence is actually a different perception time in life. And this is something that's key to remember about your kids. Things are heightened in adolescence. Proven by MRIs that it's not heightened for us. And so you create an emotional attachment to a song, Axl Rose singing Patience, Spring Break, boom. And it is, I will be unable to recognize my kids or know my grandkids and be sitting in some home at 85. But if someone starts playing Patience, I will know every single word to that song. There's an attachment that you form. They've done studies. Kids' taste buds are stronger in adolescence than they are any other time in life. And so actually, Coca-Cola will never taste sweeter. And they will never want to drink more of it. Everything in that way is kind of heightened. That's kind of fascinating to think about. They feel things more deeply. Actually, one of the books that the faculty read this summer, he was talking about the emotional impact of adolescence, and they've actually done studies in kids who are upset about something, deeply upset about something that happened during their day. Tylenol makes them feel better because it's affecting their part of the brain that is associated with physical pain. You and I get upset. We're kind of upset. Take some Tylenol, that's not going to help us. But for a 14-year-old who's like, they're in literal pain. In a way we're like, get some perspective, come on, it's like a good time. No, whatever. There's also the unique aspect of what would deter us from doing something. Isn't as much of a focus for them as what's the reward for doing something. So that's why the worst thing you can hear is an adolescent boy say, hey everybody, watch this. They have thought about the reward and how epic it will be. They have not thought about the cost. And they're often surprised that there is a cost. The best example, he's now graduated. He's in college, he's fine. In 8th grade, Sage has their little golf carts, and sometimes they're driving back and forth, bringing more stuff up. And they were stopped by the pavilion, waiting for some kids to get out of the way in 8th grade. And he went over, said, hey guys, watch this. And he grabbed the back of the golf cart without the kids, without Sage person knowing. Sage person drives away. He thought he was going to ski epically behind the golf cart. 10 yards later, when the person turns around, he's like, what is going on? And he gets up, skinned his knees. The math teacher at the time says, what were you thinking? He's like, because he was focused on this. He wasn't focused on this. And they've actually done studies where showing adolescents pictures of prizes is as good as giving them the prize. And we joked about that as teachers. If every teacher starts off class with a pile of gold or, medals or whatever, like, if you do this well today, you will be epically rewarded. Kids would actually do better. It's a decade long, potentially a little bit longer for your kid. They need to be pushed. They need to be challenged. But they also need to be protected, sometimes from themselves. And it's particularly important in earlier adolescence. And so some of the dangers that are out there that we worry about have a bigger impact on a 13-year-old than a 17-year-old, and have a bigger impact on an adolescent than an adult. Since everything is more emotional and there's greater senses, they've done all these studies and research. And when you first get exposure to something, if it's an early adolescence, it is harder to move away from it. They're looking for dopamine receptors. So I'm in math class or science class. If I can make everyone laugh, it makes me feel good. Is it the right time? Am I going to get in trouble? Did everyone laugh? Did everyone talk about it at lunch afterwards? It was worth it. This is true, especially about drugs and alcohol. Cigarettes. The kid who starts smoking at 12 will smoke their whole life, because it's wired into their brain. Kids who have their first alcoholic or drug experience earlier, it's more impactful. And so while I would never say it's okay for kids to be drinking or using drugs, there's a huge difference between a 13-year-old starting to smoke pot and a 17-year-old starting to smoke pot. And that's really, as a parent of a 9 and 11-year-old, that's a concern. Those are the things we need to be careful of. And when people are cavalier about it, we're adults. We can regulate ourselves. We can say, I'm just having a drink on Friday nights and it's no problem. But for kids, it's different. So that's something to be watchful for. Other addictive patterns become heightened. And that's why the challenge of the iPad, the greatest educational tool ever invented, is also the worst distractor ever invented. And the App Store does no helps for us. Distractors all appear, and then here's like one beneficial thing buried, 147th choice. And so you want to, we'll talk about tech in a little while, but you want to create systems where they get breaks from these things before it becomes part of their dopamine experience. So it's worth creating in your home a charging station that is either in your room or far away from their room, where every night everyone plugs in all their stuff. And you say, we're doing this so I can make sure your iPad's charged when you go to school tomorrow. Mrs. Scobie, who is our middle school tech teacher, she has 2 older sons and a younger daughter. When she goes to bed, she unplugs the router. That's brilliant. It's worth coming up with what works for your family. Limiting gaming time. Creating structures like, you can game all you want, but you got to do first. That's important. It is a great time to try something new. So as a parent, give your kid a push. You never been in the musical before? You want to try it? Well, maybe. Woo! I like the fact that in middle school sports, frequently we have 2 teams. We have the team for all the kids who are playing club and everything else, and then we have the team for kids who want to just try it out. As a teacher, it is a great opportunity to sell what you love about what you're teaching. And that's what I tell middle school teachers. Middle school teaching is about sales. Okay, so now I want you to think about your children and all the stuff they have, and your middle school and high school experience back in the day. And while they might have a lot more cool stuff now, I want you to think, which was harder? Was it harder when you grew up? Or is it harder now? The vast majority of people feel it's harder to grow up now. What did we have back in the day that made it so good to grow up?
Innocence. No communication between friends unless you were outside time.
Outdoor time.
I feel like you had more peace because you weren't inundated with information and all these things coming at you.
And more peace. What else?
No social media.
No social media.
Lack of sport pressure, academic pressure, social pressure.
Okay. Less pressure.
There was no internet.
There was no internet. So all the advances of the last 20 years, it's funny. It's two sides. It's much easier to be a kid today. I grew up in Gainesville, Florida. I did not have air conditioning in a classroom until 9th grade. So I remember last period of the day, and it happened to be 7th grade math that I really remember. Miss Wilson, who I thought was cranky and evil, she was probably just really hot. And sitting there, the windows are open, the fans are going, so there's all this noise, and you'd like lift your arm up off the desk and there'd be a wet spot where your arm was. Because you're just so like, challenges for us were also opportunities to exhibit responsibility in a way that our kids don't get to do that. So I had to ride my bike to school in middle school every day, 2 miles. And that was harder, and it was hot, it was gross, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, independence, responsibility, the comfort of, like, I can do this.
You raised a good point, because my son said something about 2 weeks ago that blew my mind. He said, I was being a little hard on him because he was just not being as confident. And I said, you know, Mom and Dad give you so much praise and confidence and always try to pump you up. Why aren't you confident? He said, Mommy, you and Daddy give me lots of confidence, but you haven't given me courage. So like things like riding your bike to school promote courage, you know, because they don't have that as much as we
There is a difference in how kids play. If this room was full, if we just magically go back to 12, and we're told you guys have 2 hours to occupy your time, and there's a pile of stuff over the corner there, and a pile of stuff over the corner here, we'd be fine. Some of us would have a ball, and would find a wall, and we'd be coming up with some game where someone ends up getting pegged. But it's in a different environment, and the way they interact with each other is different. And so they have all these great advantages, but there's also some loss. And it's worth keeping in mind. That's why I'm a big proponent of sleepaway camp, because they're not going to die. If they're homesick for the whole week, they come back and you still say, you did it. You did it on your own.
And there's no technology.
And there's no technology. We'll see in 8th grade, kids on their personal project, they have time to create a personal project. There's several kids who want to learn how to play piano or something. You can go on YouTube, pick a song, and there's the keyboard, someone's hands, you can slow it down, you can speed it up. You can't learn that from an encyclopedia. People know what this is? Snapchat. I just say Snapchat's the devil. Anything that gives you anonymity creates temptation. So I read Sports Illustrated. I like sports. I've stopped reading the comments underneath the college football articles, because within 3 comments, it's either Republicans' fault, or Obama's fault, or global warming. Like, this is about SEC football. But it's all anonymous, so people start insulting each other and ripping on each other, and then people read like your post history so they know your perspective on everything. And they start, like, where did this come from? I just want to know, like, are the Gators going to be terrible this year or not? Anything that gives kids anonymity is a challenge. It can be bad. If you don't believe me, just take a safe search off and Google Snapchat girls. Right. And then think, I don't want my daughter being one of those girls. You have to have a conversation with them. Kids want to do the right thing.
You have to be friends with people on Snapchat. You can get messages or not gone in outer space, because I found a way to.
There's all kinds of ways.
Yeah, after it's read, there is a way. It's a pain.
There's all kinds of ways. And I will say, Snapchat is being sued by a private organization who claims Snapchat is the largest purveyor of child pornography in the world, because their servers hold on to images, and so they have to have, I mean, it's crazy. Now imagine your 12-year-old self. That was unheard of. So that's a challenge. I'm going to start with the bottom. If an adolescent brain is tied into positive stimuli and feeling things better, it is more important to be there for your kid when they are the hardest to be there for than at any other time in life. And we can think back, generationally parents have different kinds of reputations, but it is so important. A hand on the back. How are you doing? Have a great day. Be good. I love you. Those are so important because sometimes, even though they don't have a reason to feel that way, they might not feel that way inside. And they need that from you more than anything. So if you screw up everything else in life, but your kids say, I know my parent loves me, that will stick with them longer than the other things. If your kid goes through adolescence and they haven't screwed up, they didn't do it right. They didn't try. And that is kind of sad. But if we talk about as teachers, we don't have a list of consequences in the handbook anymore. We used to 10 years ago. You do this, this happens. You do this, this happens. They realize they're not connected. So if you break something, you got to fix it. Number one thing, I don't know if it's a problem in the upper school or not, in the 7th and 8th grade building, there's these exit signs. They're up about 8.5 feet. And so one tall 8th grade boy just as we walk by. And so then eventually, it's like, can't I touch that? And so running. So what happens to that exit sign? But then they have to go and take it to Mr. Donahue and apologize. That's an appropriate consequence. And then we say, if he can't fix it, I'm going to tell your parents you have to pay for it. I'm going to tell them you have to pay for it. Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. Give them guidance in advance. You know what's going to happen. You have been there. You might have older siblings or the next door neighbor or nieces or nephews, or because you're a rational, forward-thinking human being, you know the outcome. And so you can give them pre, during, and post guidance. That makes a huge impact. They also need guidelines and boundaries, and this is hard because they play it on heartstrings. But I'm fine with you going to do that. They're going to do these 3 things first. And then when it's time to go do that, they've only done one. They're like, please, next time. That doesn't help their development. So some guidelines. And whatever your family wants to stick to is great. And then their best friend's family doesn't stick to that. They stick to something else. That's great. That's how they do it in their family. So what's your family core? What's your family guidelines? But I hope this has given you some things to think about.